Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over 10 years, we've produced weekly episodes featuring epic tales of tech support and troubleshooting, discussions about managing our clients and businesses, and interviews with colleagues and vendors. For our pro listeners, we offer Patreon-exclusive shows. This private podcast feed is tailor-made for IT professionals looking for advice and guidance on the more challenging aspects of running your practice, working with your clients and employees, and managing your fleets of devices. For a modest monthly contribution, you'll unlock a world of deeper Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a shared passion for Apple technology. Simply visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. And now on to the show. We are very pleased to be joined once again by Ryan Grimes, president of My IT Indy in Indianapolis, Indiana. Thanks for coming back, Ryan. Welcome to Command Control Power.
Thank you very much for having me again. It was episode 43 that I was on back in 2014. So I think you guys have kind of recovered and we're ready to do this again.
That's incredible. When this episode hits, it's going to be 401. So, wow.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations, guys. That's a huge milestone. Well, Jerry is, yeah. But
yeah, of course. But I was old when we started it.
It's great to have you back. I mean, I think a lot has changed, certainly in the last couple of years in the world at large, certainly in the Mac admin community and just our industry. I guess things have changed a little bit for you because I think you said your company was different at the time. So do you want to speak to your former company and how you got started with this incarnation of your consulting work?
Sure. So back in 2014, we were called Hoosier Mac Consulting. And that was kind of a play on Indiana and Apple stuff. And after we did that, Apple no longer allowed anybody to use the Mac in their business name to be in the Apple Consultants Network. So we snuck that one in. And we're probably the reason why nobody else could. But that was our business name for a long time, which reflected what we did. And after the number one question we always got were, unfortunately, do you guys do Windows too? We'd be like, yes, we do Windows. Well, do you do networking? Yes, we do networking. It didn't advertise everything that we were capable of. So I kind of wanted to create a company name with a small town feel, but kind of advertise that we did greater things. And after searching on Namecheap for about 12 hours for a domain name, I came up with My IT Indy. And had a great logo done with the skyline of Indianapolis in the background. And she did a fantastic job and has been on all of our, anything we can brand, I throw it on there. So it's been a huge change for how we operate. And it definitely helped us diversify ourselves from other, Apple only consultants because we kind of did more. So I think it was a great name change.
Nice. I mean, it's nice to have a slightly more sort of generic name in that sense. Still very friendly. My IT. So it's a nice rebranding. I've been thinking about that for a number of years myself for the same reason. Maybe I shouldn't mention that reason more specifically, but having certain words in your company name, even though you can be grandfathered in for a time, I assume that's not going to last forever. So my colleague over at MacWorks Worldwide headquarters may also be.
I know that guy too.
But that is a great point, though, that you want to advertise yourself in the best way possible. And sometimes when you narrowcast what you do, it doesn't necessarily inform people that you're capable of doing other things besides being like a one-trick Apple pony.
Right. Yeah. And there's even, you go too far the other way, and there's like a buddy of mine named his company two words that go together. And I'm like, what do you do? Like it didn't make any sense. Like, there was no correlation with that name to anything that they were doing. And there, you get too generic and everyone's like, oh, well, I don't know that name. So I don't know what you do. I'm not even going to look into it. You can go the other way as well.
So Ryan, what do they do? Now I have to know.
They do marketing. They basically help other companies market themselves and they pull the story out of you. And they do a fantastic job. And I know the guy, and I'm great friends with the guy that owns it locally here. But when he said his new name, I was like, that doesn't tell me anything about what you do, man.
Right.
Wow, somebody should interview him about his marketing, I guess. And
I know, right?
Tell that story. That's the trouble. Who is going to be the consultant to the consultant? That happens in our industry too. I mean, I think my tech is the least maintained tech of anybody I know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, back when we hosted stuff in a data center, I actually paid another consultant to consult and maintain it just because there's so much stuff there. Like I was busy running the stuff running on that hardware, and he was busy making sure it still stayed running. So,
right. So speaking of some of the systems that we maintain that sometimes need a little more maintenance, the one I'm thinking of is Ubiquiti, Unify, because I know you're a big Unify user as well, Ryan, and Jerry and I are. Sam, I'm not sure to what extent you're fully in that ecosystem. Are you still
what are you talking about? I'm always doing Ubiquiti. I just don't complain about it as much.
Yeah, gotcha. You're having better luck than we are.
I cry on the inside, Joe.
Well, feel free to commiserate, because Jerry and I are always, calling attention to these weird situations. Like at one point, we just stopped seeing certain networks in the one and only network portal we ever went to. We talked about it in a recent show. And, and then they start popping up a message that says, not seeing all your networks, click here. Things like that happen where things are shifting like it's a moving target. Lately, we're seeing more of those networks under the new portal, which encompasses more than just the network kind of management, but also management of other Unify features that I'm not really as well versed in. And I guess that's why they're kind of, just starting over with a fresh portal. But as Jerry pointed out, it's less functional. Like you don't have you don't see the alerts on the network, because that's just kind of like step one. You have to go look at the network, and then you'll see, more information about it. There's certain other information that's lacking. Recently, I noticed that, I don't know if there's an explanation if this is related to this issue, but the admin tab in settings went away. So I can't seem to add a new admin. And that's tricky, because I'm also experimenting with this relatively new Unify LTE. I don't know if you've used that yet, Ryan, on your side. Jerry actually installed it at one of my clients. And it's this like little cellular stick that you can plug in to anywhere on your network, which is, I think, one of the most interesting things about it. You plug it into like a PoE port somewhere on your network, and it can operate as, an LTE WAN 2. Works with the Unified Dream Machine, the Dream Machine Pro, I think also the USG with the latest firmware. It's a nice little feature, but you can only have one on any cloud portal login. So you need a different admin account for each one that you're going to maintain for your clients, let's say. So anyway, that's been my experience lately. Tricky and a moving target. And, I think where they're going, but in the meantime, it's been a little bit tough to manage. But what's your kind of latest take on that stuff, Ryan?
So we were Unify partners way back in the day, back when you had a cloud key, and that was pretty much the only way you could administer these things. Until the power went off, and then you couldn't administer these things because the database got corrupt and you were just screwed. We have been involved with them only with the new quote unquote cloud controller that they offer with the UDM and the UDM Pro. I didn't want to have to, and I've actually got a couple legacy systems in the old version that we are migrating to the new version as soon as I can get them to give us some money. The new version actually isn't too bad. It does remind me kind of like Meraki, where you can have different organizations. It doesn't have the depth that Meraki has, like with having separate networks inside an organization. It's kind of just every network. I think that they are moving very fast on this new platform. Like I have a beta home network here with version 1.9, whatever it is, of the UDM Pro firmware. And the feature list is like a page and some long. I mean, they're adding a lot of stuff. Are they adding stuff that's always going to work? Well, that's another story, because sometimes the data is not right. Sometimes, these things don't work. But then you're like, wait a minute, I just paid $100 for an access point. Like, how mad can I be? It's like going to McDonald's and being disappointed your fries are cold. Be like, yes, what did you think was going to happen? I like some of their stuff. Like, we've done some point-to-point links with UISP stuff, they call it now.
Yeah.
Those have been, knock on wood, rock solid. In fact, you couldn't even tell you were on them based on, I think the client had like 200 by 200 fiber, and we were 100 yards away in a remote building, and you couldn't tell you weren't on the local area network. That's how low the latency was. The total all in for the hardware was less than $300. So I really can't get too mad at this stuff, if it does have issues. There are certain advantages you get when you charge more for a product. You get things like, in-person support and, stable features. But at the same time, you don't always get a perfect experience. We actually replaced an entire Meraki network with an entire Ubiquiti network because their MX65 running the newest firmware out there would not fail over to cable. The main fiber went down, it would kind of fail over. So like the phones would register, but you couldn't make any calls. Like you could kind of see some sites, but DNS wasn't working right. It was just the weirdest thing. As soon as you power cycled the MX65, everything worked great on WAN 2. But until you did that, it didn't work. Well, like, wait a minute, that's an expensive box that has great support and all this, and they can't make failover work? What are we doing here? And then we replaced it with a UDM Pro, and we did get a SFP Plus to RJ45 adapter, so you could have two Ethernet WANs, and it actually failed over just fine the other day. I mean, I could not complain about it. So, you know, it's a weird world we live in where the cheap product may work better than the expensive one, but not always.
Right. Yeah. That's always the gotcha. Yeah. Well, I'm glad they are investing in it. I hope they don't ruin it because, you know, it is a pretty decent value proposition, as you say right now. I mean, I'm even interested in some of those additional features like keypad entry and cameras and doorbell cameras and things that I assume are kind of more, I wouldn't call it enterprise, more so than a Ring, I guess. It's interesting that they're moving into this kind of like fully integrated system with cameras and audio and entry, lighting even.
Ryan, you've done the cameras though, right? You've deployed them and you have some yourself. I have
done the cameras, playing around. So I've got the UDM Pro, which has Protect built into it. So I had an old hard drive here. I slapped it in there and I got a couple of cameras. I'm like, this actually isn't too bad. Again, it's only one hard drive. It's not ideal. In fact, I don't even know how old that hard drive is. So it may just die on me. But we've done the new Cloud Key 2 at a client that had the old Unify NVR. And we just did the migration and it picked right back up. In fact, I have 8 cameras streaming over a point-to-point link between a pole barn and a house. And it goes right into, like, we got the little mini rack in his living room behind the TV, and it's got Cloud Key version 2 with Unify Protect on it. And it works great. Like, he's had no issues. One thing I have noticed is that if you want like great notifications on Unify, you need to install the app on your iPhone. That will give you all more notifications than you've ever wanted. And if you have an Apple Watch, it'll put them there too.
So that's a nice way to go. We've griped about that too. I don't know what your experience has been lately, but sometimes you'll get the down notification, but not the up notification, or vice versa.
Yeah. And then also there was that setting where we found it where you can turn on up notifications. I was like, this is great. But then I just kept getting on up notifications like every hour. Like, this is not helpful at all.
You want a lot of notifications? Do a migration where you've got the same SSID being broadcast by other brands of access points or a readoption of access points. That's super fun. I think I probably got 400 malicious SSID notifications that day because they had like 15 access points and we were readopting them one by one. Wow. I mean, I literally had to take my watch off and just set it over to the side. I'm like, I can't even handle this anymore.
It's like when you do an email migration and you're kind of like backfilling somebody's email inbox and they have notifications turned on and they're just getting an alert for every email that they left in their inbox, you know, for all time in the old account. Now it's re-alerting in the new account. Yeah. It's just turn it off for a while and come back later. It's so close. Like if they sort of like, you just want them to do the logical thing, there should never be an up alert. Like if there wasn't a down alert, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, you know, logically. There's some tricks to it. And also I think with the new ones, you can get the down alert for the whole site, but otherwise that's an issue. Like you won't necessarily know that the whole site went offline, even though it's in the cloud portal. Like, you know, Unify should be able to tell that. Like, it'd be nice if they would enable that. I think that might be a relatively new feature where you can get that alert now, but I just haven't put much more effort.
Like the firewall's offline, but the rest of it won't give you a notification. Yeah, I've gotten that one before. It's weird. Like, you're right. They are so close to having a fantastic platform. You know, someone's not really paying attention higher up the food chain, I think. And you want people to be successful and you want them to focus on what they're good at. And then they come out with PoE powered LED lights. Is this a question somebody asked? Like, you know what? We've got all these extra PoE ports. We should totally light this place up. Be like, nah, maybe not. Let's get back to what we're good at.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was thinking as you guys were talking was it's such a great product and the value proposition is extremely low. I'd even pay more money for their equipment to just have a little bit more, not stability, but let us see the roadmap with the software. Let us know as the ball is moving, give us a map that we could follow the ball down the road. I think it'd be a lot happier. But just sometimes to discover these things on your own, like we've talked about on other shows, it's a real Pandora's box just operating it. And, when you get a client involved, I can think of my client in particular who is really persnickety and wants to get deep into the technology. He wants to just turn everything on. DHCP snooping, you name it, anything that's on that firebox, he wants to turn it on.
Oh, God. You just crashed your firewall because it didn't have enough RAM and you overloaded it. So,
Ryan, I know offline we talked a little bit about some things you've gone through of late, and I think it was a confluence of things. Do you want to speak more about some of those things? I think listeners could relate to some of the saga of dealing with clients and some of the other issues you've dealt with.
Back in December, we got approached by a very good referral, and we were already pretty busy. Like we're planning out our January and February at that point. And we got a very hot lead from a client, and the client is awesome. They're like, okay, one of our sister companies that we partner with is they're moving. And when someone tells you that a warehouse is moving, it's like, oh, there's a lot there. So it was a situation where they had to move warehouses because they had outgrown their current one. I think they had like 80,000 square feet and needed almost 200,000 square feet. So they started the move process. And then what happened to them was Amazon came in and said, hey, Mr. Guy who owns the warehouse, I'll give you 10 years lease cash up front if you just sell it to me today. And they did. So the prospect was like, oh, I guess we need to go find a new warehouse. So they went and they ended up finding two warehouses because they couldn't find any one as big as they needed. So they came to us and like, okay, we need this mapped out. Like we need Wi-Fi from day one. Like we need all of our Wi-Fi scanners to work because if you know how a warehouse functions, they're basically a bunch of people running around with Wi-Fi guns, scanning codes, pulling product, and those codes go back to a main database and lets everyone know what the status of all the product is. So they didn't have those previously. So they were going to upgrade and get those. So we quoted them out. I mean, it was a UniFi setup between two networks, and it was probably all in about between $18,000 and $20,000 for both setups. And that included new phones, new wiring, because warehouse wiring is always trash. From environmental aspects, so you could probably go up there and snap an Ethernet cable in half just because there's no environmental controls in there. It was a big setup with metal racking, the shelves that they're pulling products off. So you have to make sure that you have Wi-Fi in between the racks where there are racks. But open areas, you could have a little bit more freedom where you put things. So we mapped both things out and probably spent about 2 weeks of December dealing with this. And sat down with the CEO and our point of contact, went through the quotes on both warehouse sites and recurring maintenance on them, which was going to be a fairly significant amount of money because they had complicated systems. They had a warehouse management server, a physical server, they had a QuickBooks server. Like nothing was done right. It was just this big disaster of technology that barely worked. And the CEO is like, yes, let's sign, let's get this done, send it over to me and I'll sign it. And I said, sure, I sent it over to him. And I never heard from him again. He refused to return any text messages or phone calls, emails. The point of contact there, who had actually was fairly cool with us, was having conversations with us. He ghosted us. It was like they never had ever talked to us. And I was just like, what in the world? So we had dropped everything in December, one of our busiest months, to help these guys move because they needed to be in there in January. And if you've ever run like 7 miles of cable, it doesn't happen very quickly. They just totally ghosted us. I was like, what in the world happened? So I kept calling. Well, finally my wiring guy went over there to their new facility after the date where they had to be in there. And he's like, yeah, they've literally got the Comcast modem plugged into a Netgear switch with an access point sitting on top of it for their main office. Like they deserve every bad thing that's going to happen to them because they didn't listen to an expert. And honestly, like after we went through this, I'm like, I dodged a bullet really because dealing with them moving forward would have been awful because they would have tried to do things on the cheap whenever possible. But karma is a very finicky animal. And I went back to my client that had referred them. And I'm like, hey, that other company you referred? He's like, yeah, how's that going? He's like, they were all gung-ho to work with you. I'm like, yeah, they totally ghosted us. Like they just didn't even email or call or return anything. Like they still owe us like $800 for some work we did to, get some stuff working for them. And not, they haven't paid that. And he's like, well, that's crap. He's like, you know what? He's like, nobody does that to my vendors. He's like, I'm not giving them any work moving forward. And he's like, I probably give them $100,000 worth of work a year. He's like, I'm not giving it to them anymore. I'll go give it to somebody else. I mean, even a text message saying, Ryan, you're just too expensive. We don't have the money to do this. But the fact that you verbally agreed to something and then you just ghosted them, dude, nobody does that. Yeah. That's just crap. So what the downside to all that was, it actually pushed back our calendar because we had dropped everything to help these guys move, and everyone else was fine with it. They're like, it's not that big a deal. Like, our projects can be put back. But then what happened to me on January 1st is I woke up with COVID, which is not fun. I was like, that's weird. You know, I had a couple of drinks last night and like nothing major. I'm like, I'm feeling a little bit achy. Let the dogs out in the morning, was kind of outside. I'm like, man, this like 5-degree weather feels fantastic. Like, this is so nice. And I went back inside, and by noon, I'm like, hon, I think I got some bad symptoms here. And I'm like, I'm going to go lay down and take a nap. And I laid down and slept for like 6 hours, at noon, which is, never happens. And I woke up and I was like the COVID checkbox symptom game. I had like,
oh man,
everything, but I didn't have because they say you lose your taste and your smell. I didn't have that. And I'm like, I may have the regular flu. I may just, 103 fever, like achy, like eyeballs hurting, like sinus infection type stuff. I mean, it was just terrible. And I know my wife has helped me get through it. And like the second day, I'm like, okay, this still sucks. Luckily we had a guest room I could work in, and it was the weekend, it was a long weekend, so I didn't have to worry about anything. But I was worthless. I mean, I was literally laying in bed watching my iPad, watching old TV shows because I couldn't do anything else. Like, everything else hurt. So I ended up, and then on day 3, my wife handed me a drink. I drank it and said, man, that water is really nice. And she's like, that was a Sprite.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Uh-oh. That's not good. I'm like, yep, I got COVID.
Before you continue any further, I've got so many questions. The onset of it happened in, it sounds like, 12 hours. Within 12 hours, you went to bed one night and you woke up the next day and you felt...
It was like 7 hours.
Wow.
Because I went to bed right after midnight and woke up because the dogs get up at early in the morning. I let the dogs. I was like 7 hours. I went from totally fine to, oh my God, what's wrong?
I would be extremely fearful. Did you try to get on the phone and call people? I know part of this answer because we've talked off mic. I would have been panicked. It seems like you weren't.
You know what? I've had stuff happen, and getting upset about it doesn't make it any better. So I just like, okay, I'm sick. My wife, on the other hand, was like losing her mind. She's like, oh my God, what happens if you die? I'm like, let's not go there yet. Like, let's get me past this and it'll be fine. There's nothing I can do. I mean, I was so sick. I didn't even care that I was sick. I was like, I just want to get over this. I mean, I had all the symptoms. It was ridiculous. Finally, you mentioned calling in. So my wife found a call-in doctor, because you can't even get into like your regular doctor these days. They're just booked up for months. And it was an amazing service. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up.
I actually documented that when we chatted in Slack. So I'll find that for you as you're talking.
What it was like you pay $50 and you get a phone call back from a doctor, and he's like, okay, do you have this? I'm like, yeah. He's like, how's your sinus infection? I'm like, it's kind of a fake one. It feels like I have one, but I don't. Yeah, you got COVID. He's like, I'm going to call in a prescription, 2 rounds of ivermectin, which is a weird drug that it was like meant for animals, but they figured out it stops COVID from being able to do things inside your body like spread. So they were having good success with it. He's like, I'm going to put you on 2 rounds of this. And he's like, I'm going to call you back in 48 hours.
The service was speakwithanmd.com.
Speakwithanmd.com. Super nice guy, a local doctor. Text me your pharmacy to make sure we send it to the right one. It was like 7:30 at night. So the next morning we got up and went and got my medicine, and it was as easy as could be. And the doctor was super cool. He called me back in like 2 days. He was like, hey, how you feeling? I'm like, I'm getting better, which was a good thing at that time. It was definitely not fun. Like I was sitting here on day 3 going, you know what, if I don't get better, like I may need to go to the hospital. And my wife was like, you don't want to go to the hospital. Like that's where all the sick people are. Like they're just going to tell you, yes, you have COVID. You just need to get better. I'm like, yeah, that's true. So luckily I did have a guest room because my oldest has moved out of the house. So I was able to hibernate in there with my trusty dog who did not leave my side for 2 weeks. And I was able to get back together. But being a small business owner, like Monday sucked because it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then Monday was awful. I texted my team. I'm like, I'm going to be in and out of the office until the foreseeable future. At that point, I wasn't really doing a whole lot. In fact, I think I took most of that first week off totally and just emailed everyone and said, hey, we're not doing anything. I've got COVID. We're in maintenance mode. And of course, everyone's like, oh, yeah, we had so-and-so had it. You should do this. So-and-so had it. You should do that. And I'm like, I don't need any medical advice. Like, I'm just trying to get better right now.
Call someone who's not an MD.com.
Exactly. And it was a long time to get better. I think it was 3 weeks before I was able to actually work a full day, because I'd work in the morning. I worked for 2 hours, and then I'd be like, you know what? I got to go take a nap. And I would go lay down on the couch outside my office and sleep for 3 hours.
Now, how did you handle being in the house around your family? Because you've got a wife and kids.
Yeah. I tried. I tried to stay away from everybody. I had like I said, I had the guest room, and my wife was bringing me stuff, so she ended up getting it as well. But she had the light version. She had a headache and the sinus stuff and the cough, which I actually had kind of a cough, but she had the full blown cough. But that's as bad as it got. She actually had a nebulizer from some other treatment she was on for being ill one year. So she actually loaded that sucker up and just sat there on the nebulizer, which is the little thing you hook up and you breathe in particleized components that help break up things in your lungs. So she stayed on that, and luckily she was able to take care of my worthless butt. So I had 2 kids living with me as well. So I got a 14-year-old and now 10-year-old. The 14-year-old got kind of sick. He had a headache one day and was tired the next day and then was fine. And then my 10-year-old never got it. After a couple of days, I was sick, but I had to get up and move around. I couldn't just lay in bed. The kids were quarantined, so they didn't even go back to school in January. They went back to school the last day of January from Christmas break.
Wow.
Ryan, you're not some little scrawny guy, right? You're over 6 feet. A person would say that, you're physically fit. It just seems to affect everybody, and you never know.
Yeah. And what's lucky about a lot of this is that if a husband and wife get it, they typically, one of them has it a lot worse than the other. So the other one that doesn't have it as badly can take care of the other person.
Right.
We've seen that a lot with couples that have had it. But yeah, I had lost 20 pounds in November. I was eating better, trying to get back into shape, kind of get my 2020 back on path. And I did. 2020 ended positively. And then 2021 started. It all went downhill pretty fast. It was a combination of diet and exercising. I'm starting to exercise again when I have time. Now we've got to catch up because I was out pretty much all of January. So as a small business owner, you're like, remember all those projects you had in December you couldn't get done? Yeah, now it's February and they're due. So we are working very hard to get everything done.
That's a lot to go through, my friend. And I'm glad it came out fine on the other side. It's a scary moment during it, I'm sure. I don't know from personal experience, but besides obviously how it affected you personally and on the health side, with the way you run your business, are you doing a lot of the technical stuff too, where a lot of that stuff halts because you're sick?
No, I have a full-time head technician. So he was, I messaged him. I'm like, just so you know, I am not going to answer the phone. And I did. So we have a VA, a virtual assistant as well, because she routes all incoming calls to me. And then we kind of route them. I emailed her and said, look, I'm out. Sean's a go-to guy. Just push everything to him. If it's a support issue, if it's anything else, if it's a business or sales or whatever, just tell them I'm out sick and take a message. He was able to keep everything running. Now, granted, it was, the beginning of the year, everyone's kind of get started back up. And as soon as he said Ryan's out, he's sick, everyone's like, ooh, okay, everything's fine. We're doing okay. So everyone was very sympathetic. But ultimately, yeah, stuff did get sideways and he was able to rock it out. He's actually been handling the documentation and tech support for us since October. So he was kind of new. But then he got to meet the rest of the clients that he hadn't met before and hey, you got to go there. He's like, I've never been there. I'm like, that's okay. They're nice. We have documentation. Everything's documented. You just got to go there. And he did a great job.
You speak to a really risk factor for small business owners where when the owner is out, it can really be devastating. And not to mention the fact that was coming on the tail of the client debacle that you mentioned where one client project gone wrong and that can be a really tough thing. You're talking about planning a month. A month's worth of work is a very significant, it's a 12th of your yearly income, say. That could be a big factor, a make or break kind of situation. It's a lot different than than somebody working for a company and just collecting a paycheck that's consistent every month. I mean, there's no guarantee there either, of course, because that job can go away. It's definitely a risk with what we have to deal with. Whereas if one of our employees gets sick, we still pay them. And we also, in the time of COVID, I'm not sure what the latest is on this, but we can also get some kind of help for basically extending sick leave and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's just harder to actually deal with, the fallout from that. I think one interesting aspect of this is sort of that like handshake deal or verbal agreement that you had with the business owner. For all intents and purposes, you were moving forward and you were doing a lot of work in good faith, really, on the assumption that you're helping them out. You can understand where they're coming from and they really need somebody to step up and really own it. It's not like you were still trying to sell it. You thought that it was all but confirmed. Oftentimes we do go out on a limb for clients like that, maybe on a small scale, sometimes on a big scale like that. Do you want to say more about maybe how you've rethought your policies about how much effort to put in and at what point do you start moving forward with something like that?
That's a great thing because, we had a verbal agreement from a trusted referral from one of our best clients. So normally that's a slam dunk. Obviously, it wasn't. And that made me rethink our sales process and not really break away from it in order to accommodate somebody who hasn't planned. Because honestly, they were moving into a warehouse in 3 weeks. They hadn't even scheduled internet. We were providing all of that stuff for them and, expediting Comcast to install internet and expediting shipment on stuff because they hadn't planned. That should have been a big red flag to me. I will admit that, the dollars did kind of cloud me at first because it was going to be a large client. It was going to be a large, recurring client that was in a vertical that we're pretty good at and we can nail. And everything on paper looked good, but my spidey senses should have pinged about the fact that they just were flat out not prepared for anything, and lesson learned, don't deviate from if you have a sales process for a reason, don't deviate from it. If they can't play ball by your terms, the lack of preparation on their part does not necessitate an emergency on your part, which I didn't listen to because I kind of got blinded by dollar signs on that. The lesson learned on that is just don't do it.
Well, plus it's an emotional thing too. We're all small business owners and we want to do the right thing. We want to help a client, especially a new client. We want to be there with the old saying, cape and tights not included. And we want to show how sincere and how great we actually are. And so that tendency or that need to want to be, an IT superhero, it's a perfect opportunity. You came in here and you saved the day for this guy. And then that just gets ripped from underneath you. And not only is it financially deflating, it's emotionally deflating. I don't care what you say and how much you distance yourself from the day-to-day activities of the business and try not to, don't take it personal kind of thing. You take all that personal.
Yeah, exactly. We had spent 2 weeks of our time going to different warehouses, mapping things out. It was a huge issue that had we moved forward, it would have been totally fine. No big deal. We just did it. Then it turned into, oh crap, we screwed up other stuff because of this too. So I don't want to say screwed up, but I shouldn't have put things off that we did based on, this not happening. So we were coming in to save the day and we didn't end up saving the day for them. And we certainly didn't save the day for anyone else either. We kind of screwed up the day.
And you're really lucky that you didn't get financially hosed on this.
Yeah, exactly. The clients could have been really mad. Luckily, a lot of the stuff that we were working on for them was stuff that was not, really urgent. But at the same time, it did end up costing us a couple of things, projects that they're just flat out not moving forward with. And I don't think it was necessarily to do with the fact that we weren't able to do it then, but they reevaluated where they're going to spend some money versus doing it with us.
It's such a tough situation because this could happen again and you could even remember the situation that you went through. And it's still hard in that moment to maintain that level of awareness and still proceed with caution and only go at the speed of trust, on this kind of thing. I've been there, not to that same degree, and I look at how did this go on for 3 weeks? Maybe I could cut myself some slack on a week, maybe 2. And it's I should have demanded payment much sooner, and for some reason I got into this situation where I was still doing work for them and they hadn't paid me, and it becomes a mess, and it can happen. And again, that's lost productivity from your side. That should have been time when you were billing, putting you in a better position for when your own illness, taking you out of operation for a few weeks, you would have been better set up for that. You seem to be dealing with all that very, very well under the circumstances. I feel like I would have been pretty emotionally devastated having gone through that kind of situation.
Well, the one thing I did talk to my wife about it, what went wrong. We kind of debriefed on the whole situation. And at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? We ended up dodging a bullet because they were not a good client for us if they're going to do stuff like this. It taught us a lot of stuff. We're doing a ton of marketing, like we're going and getting things done. And that revenue that we were missing with them, I've made it up in other ways in a month. And half of the month I was sick. So there's more work out there. I mean, our industry should be absolutely blown away with the amount of work that we have to do. We should be able to generate more business simply by putting Facebook Live videos out there or doing something like, networking with other companies. Like we have more stuff going on now than we did in December because we have been working hard. Like I've got new things going on, and it's actually helping us refine our sales pipeline because obviously we need to work on that if we ended up being buttheads about that thing last year. So it's helping us get more organized. Like I'm actually investing in, we're using Active Campaign, and I'm building that out for a sales pipeline and a CRM tool. And it's going to help keep us more organized and help keep us more focused and allow us to not get off the rails when something shiny hops up, which, that's all me. I mean, it really is. Like we dodged a bullet, but at the end of the day, like I feel like I should have known that there was a bullet to begin with.
It's easy to look back for one thing and say like, yeah, I should have known, but it's really hard in the heat of the moment, especially when a big client comes your way. By the way, good on you for using a great old fashioned term, butthead. I love that one.
That's a great term.
It's just classic.
And I hate to say it, but it was the money that, it was pretty good money. It would have been one of our larger clients. The level of service that they needed, which we rock at because we service that vertical all the time, it would have been, I don't want to say easy, but it would have fit right into our strong wheelhouse of services and allowed us to really kick butt at it and help them grow, because that's what we do is we help them grow and be more efficient. And they had like backwards technology, which we could see when we walked in there. Like, oh, look, the Comcast modem connected to a $300 Netgear switch with a $50 access point on top of it. And you think that's going to cover your office? Like,
and it was probably hanging by the cable, I'm sure.
It probably was. And I mean, it was like dumb stuff. Like their phones only rang the CEO and like nobody could leave a voicemail. So they just took the phone off their website. I'm like, why do we do stuff like that?
Yeah. You bring up some really interesting points there. And I mean, first of all, it's great that you're able to look on the bright side. And I agree with the kind of philosophy of there's almost like no such thing as a mistake. There's the old saying, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There's some real truth to that. These challenges, these sometimes really difficult situations do like temper us for being able to face even more difficult situations as time goes on and look on the bright side of being able to make the adjustments to just be better going forward. So that's all well and good. There's also something you brought up where there's so much work in our industry broadly. Like I look around and I see, I don't know what percent, 80%, 90% of people are ticking time bombs of security issues. Just waiting to be compromised, have tens of thousands of dollars leave their bank account, and that's when they wake up. But if you could somehow reach those people and just one by one, start to help them, I mean, that's just the first thing that comes to mind. But that's really broadly in our industry, there's a lot of security issues, not only on the personal basis, with technologies, with services and sites and hardware and everything. And so that alone just demonstrates just how much work there is, let alone the day-to-day of actually, managing clients. I think there's a lot of work out there. We've certainly seen that. And I think there's got to be a way to connect the dots for people to sell them the services that they truly need. We're not selling snake oil. We're not really trying to add shiny things to the screen or something. We're trying to actually make their security better and their workflow improved. I think there's a real need for it if people just wake up to those needs. So interested in what you think about bigger picture stuff like that.
We're taking two approaches for our marketing, basically how we're getting our message out there. And there's security. You're not being a secure platform. Your business is doing bad things. And efficiency. Like, how can we make you work better? I did a Facebook Live on this last week, and we had an ex-client come back to us. They left us about a year and a half ago because, they were just like, okay, we can do this on our own. I was like, fair enough. Like, there's 5 of you or 6 of you. That's okay. Good luck. And we parted on good terms. And my point of contact there called me one day. I was like, that's weird. Like, he's calling my cell phone. Like, the caller ID showed up. I'm like, hey, what's up? And he's like, so we got phished. How bad was it? He said $50,000. Said, how did it happen? And it was one of those emails that comes in and says, hey, it's time to renew your password. Click here to type in what your existing password is.
Yep.
And it was over.
Wow.
And it was over at such a level, guys, that I was like, I would be surprised if you pull through this, because there's legal ramifications for what happened to you because nobody noticed for a week. The principal attorney's mailbox was hacked, and there's all sorts of PII out there now. And I was like, guys, this is not good. 2 things could have saved them: having MFA, multi-factor authentication, on their Office accounts, because they've been like, hey, that's weird. We're not in Russia. Maybe we shouldn't let this person log in. And the second thing was having a verbal communication method for confirmation before sending money. Because what happened is my point of contact emailed the lead attorney, said, hey, can you authorize so-and-so to pay this? She can wire the money tomorrow. She's authorized up to $60,000 via ACH. And the principal attorney sent it to the office manager, said, can you pay this? Well, they then sent a spoofed email to the same lead attorney, said, hey, can you pay this invoice as spoofed as my point of contact? And he forwarded it right on. And they paid a $49,000, 860 whatever dollar invoice to somebody in another country. And had the office manager had a policy in place that said, if someone asked me to pay an invoice over, let's say, $5,000, I need verbal confirmation from them before I do this. This never would have happened.
Right.
So that's kind of our story on that side of it.
Wow. That's a great warning for other clients. Well, I like the fact that they had left you as a client first, because I hesitate to tell stories about my clients who are still clients, who were my clients when something like this happened, because they didn't listen to my advice on, hey, we really need to improve the security situation here. And not every client receives that kind of advice, or we have sort of the opportunity to even advise them on that. I mean, we would love to work with every client on this and just make everybody's life slightly better. It doesn't always happen with every client. And so sometimes existing clients that are, perfectly good clients, this can happen to anybody. I don't like to share the stories. One of my clients lost 50 grand, just got wired out of their account. That sucked, I don't like to share that with the potential new client. No. They're probably thinking why didn't you help them? So it's a great story to say, well, they left us and then they lost money and it wasn't us that did it. Also,
right.
That's a significant warning. It's just the practices that are out there are so, people just don't scrutinize this stuff. And when you're talking about the potential upside being 50 grand, it's worth putting the people who have decent grammar and command of English on the caper, who send those phishing emails. There's a very thin barrier that's protecting most people, which is the grammar in these emails is generally terrible. Mm-hmm. Anybody, the basic level of English can just read it and say, Apple would never phrase it that way. That's clearly not Apple writing this email. But if you have the upside being, 50 grand can leave the account, you might get somebody who's reasonably competent actually trying to actively exploit somebody.
That's really what it was. And it was something that was so innocuous. It looked janky, but everybody's got 10 seconds. They're not paying 100% attention. I mean, we've all been there. It's not even a matter of knowing better, because I did something dumb the other day. I had something on a server and something on my desktop. And I was like, oh, I've got 2 of these. I don't need both. And I copied the one on my desktop over to the server. And I was like, oh, I just copied an empty folder onto a full folder. Well, it was gone. What the hell was I thinking? I wasn't looking at what I was doing. I was like, ugh. And then I had to restore from backup, and I was able to get back up and running. But I mean, I do this for a living. I've done this for decades, and I still do dumb things every now and then. But I have safeguards in place that cover my backside if I do something dumb.
Right.
So you can't become a butthead.
Yeah, butthead. Yeah, cover your butthead.
Nice. That's a great lesson, or a few lessons there that you've shared with us, Ryan. This is great to get this wisdom. I think that is a great lesson, especially coming from you. You've been at this for as long as, if not longer than, three of us have. You can still have this kind of situation happen. Let that be a lesson to all of us and to all the listeners out there, to just be extra careful. Maybe use Ryan's story about his ex-client and just share that with your clients as a potential warning, because I think a lot of this stuff is really a ticking time bomb. State of security, broadly speaking, is not great. I really like what Apple's doing toward that goal, improving security overall on a sort of deeper level, but they're trying to protect us against our own bad habits to some degree as well.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of also be willing to play along, we and our clients. There's a lot of work to be had, and sometimes you do have to use a little fear, uncertainty, and doubt to motivate your clients to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And, we don't just market with that because people don't want to hear that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you tell someone as you've already, if they come to you or they're interested in that topic, but most people aren't. I mean, if I start talking about cybersecurity, most people, you see their eyes glaze over and they're like, just stop talking to me, please. Like that's the stuff they aren't caring about. But if you can show them how to use technology to better their business, like, hey, check out this cool feature. Like, we can answer our phones from anywhere and we can work from home and not miss phone calls. And they're like, what? Like, how does that work? Like, how do we get that service?
Yeah, it's a really valid point, is that a lot of this isn't marketable. Sure, we could put a nifty PowerPoint presentation, but at the end of the day, if you've got an existing client, I mean, I could think of a handful of my clients, they're Yankees and they're small businesses and they just want convenience. Security takes a second place to the convenience of not doing two-factor. And like Joe said, everybody's just a prime target out there just waiting to get compromised. If you try to tell them to use two-factor, you can't necessarily translate that into billable hours. You can advise them and, maybe for 15 minutes, maybe do a presentation to their group, but then it's kind of a lose for them and it's not really a win for you either, except that you're protecting them, but they don't realize the importance of what you're telling them. I don't know. Sometimes you throw up your hands of frustration.
Yeah. And sometimes that's where you pull out one of those stories and say, look, this happened. This is a real life story. Like, I will call the dude right now and he will confirm that this happened to his law firm. This is real stuff. Like, I understand that security is a bunch of choices. I mean, it's really like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? And, the more they say yes, the more secure it is. You need to get them to say yes as many times as possible on those services in order to protect their business. We have some clients that they're like, if the internet goes down and the printer explodes and, my laptop, I drop it in the toilet, be like, I'll be all right till tomorrow. And then we got clients that say, if the Wi-Fi thinks of blipping, or if I go between two access points and I can sense that my Wi-Fi dropped a little bit, that's a ticket. And it's... I mean, or they're like, if I can't print, that's a huge thing, because they're like, I'm working on a legal brief that has to be submitted to a judge. The judge is in front of me. I can't submit it to him. Like, that's a problem. So, we deal with all those things, and it depends on what it's worth to them. Like, we can make your platform as secure as possible. Obviously the world is building bigger buttheads and that like to click on things, but we can put all of our time and energy into this. At the end of the day, we have layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of security. It might not be enough.
Top layer is a Post-it note with the master password on it. That's the problem.
Yeah, it could be your thumbprint to your phone. That could control the entire fate of your company. And then you go get hit by a bus and like, okay, well, now we got an issue because there's no finger. There's all these choices to be made, and there's even there's crazy levels of security out there. You can have like analytic-based cloud service log analyzation where they're like, oh, Joe's accessing his email from New York and Boston, and those two are cool, but wait, is he really in Boston right now? Let's take a look and see what other services he's accessing from. Okay, so that's legit, but oh wait, he's accessing Dropbox from, California. Like, no, that's not legit. Shut down the service, file a ticket, and it's all this crazy level of behavioral stuff. Are you really accessing your stuff, your Dropbox at 4:00 in the morning?
I'm just trying to get clients to click use strong password. It's the default choice. Just do the thing that your computer's trying to help you. They go out of their way and then they proclaim to me, they're like, I always click don't use. I'm like, why? Why do you do that? This is like the one thing
you can do to just improve your security. Just use a strong password.
Exactly. Oh, but I just changed my password and put the next number at the end of it. Be like, you know what behavioral analytics are for this stuff, and looking at the history of the passwords. I'm pretty sure they can guess that you're doing this.
Not to mention the fact that like they know everybody's habits. There's probably some like kind of ML, machine learning. We know. I mean, I just know intuitively. It's like people add a number, they add an exclamation point. Those are my examples usually, and people are sheepish about that. They're like, oh yeah, I have done that. Then they start to listen. They're like, okay, I get that like a hacker, hacker person on the internet or whatever, has my name and email address and password in a spreadsheet, and that they bought from some other hacker, and they have some automated tool that's going to try like that with a 1 at the end or an exclamation point, and they're going to automatically guess your password. People do come around to that, but I mean, I have hour-long conversations about improving security on an individual basis. I've talked about it on the show before. I mean, I should probably see like, what percentage of my calls are actually like focused on this. There's a lot of room for improvement there, and there's a big need, and I think it can really help people just starting there, not to mention all the additional things, multi-factor and everything else.
And that's just a strong password. It's barely scratching the surface on all this stuff you should do to actually do real in-depth security, file vault and all that stuff, and making sure that you have encrypted backups, offsite, cloud service backups. Everyone's just like, oh, it's in the cloud. Be like, yeah, that just means it's on a server sitting in Washington or wherever. It doesn't mean it's backed up anywhere. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, cloud is syncing, not necessarily backup. And then they start to understand it's like if you delete a photo over here and it gets deleted everywhere and you don't notice quickly enough, bye-bye photo.
Oh my God. Apple's desktop documents, garbage that they do.
Yeah. That and the fact that they think that they just assume that the Mac is backed up because they're on the cloud. They just think like, I'm on the cloud. I think it's probably 2 or 3 times a week I'm telling people that their Mac is not backed up to iCloud. I mean, it will be eventually, and I always point that out, but not, it's not a feature today.
Yes, I totally get that. It's like, that is the worst idea Apple ever came up with for business use. Let's put that qualifier out there. The desktop syncing was terrible because we probably had a dozen or two like, oh, what are all these folders doing on my desktop on my work computer? I don't want them here. And they would delete them and they would be gone in both spots. And that was a terrible phone call nobody wanted to have.
Yeah, and I wish they would just have some basic level of commingling files and merging, but just to like dump everything into a folder like Joe's MacBook Pro 15-inch, and it's like, and then I have just a pile of stuff on this computer and a pile of stuff in this folder over here. Clients just don't know what to do about that. And it's great that it works a little better as far as the syncing actually goes. It does work, but people really don't understand it. Like they need a tutorial for this stuff before it gets kind of just flipped on by default. It's like an opt-in kind of thing now. So yeah, it's tricky, and they need our help. And luckily there's money to be made there, as we all know from decades of doing this. But we should probably wrap up here looking at the time. Anything else you wanted to mention, Ryan, before we let you go?
We're all in this. We all deal with this crazy stuff. Like, you're going to have days where you want to go brew beer, and you're going to have days where this is the greatest job in the world. Just hang in there. Especially for people just starting up now, because a lot of people have lost their jobs and they're starting up doing IT stuff. The community is strong. Like, if you go to either the Mac admin Slack channel, you go to other resources like going to the ACN places, people are willing to help you. We are here for each other. I even work with one of the ACNs that's in Indianapolis. His wife got transferred up here for work. He referred a client to us, and they're great. We work together on stuff, and he bounces questions off me. So what if we're competitors? Like, we get better because we help each other out, not because we push forward all on our own, especially if you're like a 1 or 2 person shop, because you're not going to know everything, man. My brain is full, and we're like a 3-person shop, and we got to keep bringing on more stuff. So be excellent to each other and don't be a butthead.
That's 2 great references in one line. I love it.
Yes.
Words to live by. Ryan Grimes for president. I think society needs this kind of message. Like, there's plenty to go around. We're better when we cooperate. It helps everybody. So that's a great message. And, until you run for president of the country, you can remain president of my IT Indy in Indianapolis, Indiana. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining us on Command Control Power.
Absolutely. Take it easy, everyone.
Command Control Power. Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time. Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I